Hey guys, tonight we slip back thousands of years, breathing in the hot, dusty air of ancient Mesopotamia. You stand in the flickering lamplight of your mud brick home, listening to the city of slowly stirring to life. Chickens cluck, neighbors shout, and somewhere a donkey starts braying at a very unhelpful volume. You pull on your scratchy reed fiber sandals, trying not to think about how much they dig into your toes, and glance at the slab of wet clay waiting for your next cuneiform duty. It's the same dull brown as the river sludge you rinsed from your tunic last night. And today, it might decide whether you can feed your family or get booted from your job entirely. You probably won't survive this, honestly. The rules are strict, the overseers are stricter, and one wrong move could see you kicked out of the workforce and begging for stale barley on the street. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I'd love to know. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the doorway, shoulders tense, because the day ahead is no joke. Around you, the city's clay-colored walls glow in the first copper sunlight, the canals starting to flow with brackish water that smells faintly of fish guts. If you thought your boss was picky, well, the gods themselves are said to inspect your work, and your boss answers to them. That's enough to make even the strongest brewer or brickmaker clutch their stomach in fear. As you walk through winding alleys, past stacked homes, you see other workers emerging, carrying baskets, tools, scrolls, or sometimes just a hopeful face ready to beg for day labor. The city's hum is alive with work songs and small fights breaking out over spilled grain. The sidewalks, if you can call them that, are already drying into hard, cracked patterns that might scrape your feet raw if you trip. And trip you will if you don't watch your step around stray goats and children darting underfoot. One mainstream historical fact is that ancient was one of the first truly urban societies, boasting schools, temples, breweries, even administrative offices full of scribe apprentices. This meant it had what you might call a job market, with professional roles, harsh bosses, and plenty of eager replacement workers. So yes, you really could get fired. And fast. A quirky tidbit you probably didn't hear in class is that the smell of donkey droppings mixed with cooking onion was so normal here, some visitors from other cities actually praised it as a sign of prosperity. Imagine putting that on your tourism poster. You duck to avoid a potter's apprentice swinging a half-finished urn, nearly clocking you across the skull. and continue on, breathing in a blend of baking bread and sewage. Your job today is to help track barley rations for temple workers. If you get the numbers wrong on those clay tablets, your overseer might strip you of your job, your pay, and your reputation. Historians still argue whether these overseers worked from a sense of personal power or if they were following divine orders that they themselves feared to break. Either way, the whip, or the threat of being dismissed and sent back to field labor, was very, very real. You step onto a busy plaza where scribes are already setting up their reed pens and wooden benches, ready to record loans, purchases, and payments. Some merchants scowl as they haul heavy sacks toward inspectors who will check for moldy grain or fake weights. And you, barley clerk for the day, are already sweating. Your mouth goes dry because messing up numbers around here is basically asking for the world's first pink slip. Except instead of pink, it's mud-colored, and instead of a slip, it's a shouting match with a shaved-headed administrator who will ruin you with 3 words: you are out. A soft breeze comes off the river, stirring your damp hair, but offers no comfort. You wonder if you might have a backup plan, maybe sign on as a beer server, though you've heard of one brewer who was dismissed after letting a batch turn sour. He had to work as a porter for months to rebuild trust, carrying crates so heavy they crushed his toes. Better keep your barley counts clean, you think, even if your eyes are blurry from a night of tossing and turning. Nearby, a group of children play at being priests, chanting half-remembered blessings and laughing. One girl pretends to fire another from their imaginary bakery, shrieking, "Go home, worthless barley liquor." You crack a tired grin. Even kids here know what it means to get sacked. As you edge closer to the temple compound, a tall, bearded supervisor is already glaring across the courtyard, picking out stragglers like a hawk. He's wrapped in a finely patterned wool shawl, but the scowl on his face is sharper than a chisel. He motions you over with one imperious finger. That finger could seal your fate, reminding you that your place is never secure. And you, yes, you, will have to do everything in your power today to keep your spot among these ranks. The air tastes of dust and desperation. You wonder if you'll still have a roof over your head by the time the sun sets. Your toes curl against the reed sandals, ready to follow the supervisor's barked orders, praying you don't drop a single grain, or slip on a wet patch of clay, or miss a number that will leave you accused of fraud. This is your world now, Mesopotamia, the birthplace of bureaucracy, where a slip of the stylus can change a life forever. The supervisor's finger, still stiff in the air, twitches with impatience. You hurry over, trying to look both obedient and competent, a tricky balance when your knees are knocking slightly. He doesn't speak right away, just grunts, then jabs a thumb toward a bench beside a basket of barley, sealed with a thick clay tag. Your task is clear. Tally the contents against yesterday's record. Easy enough, right? Well, not really, because in ancient Mesopotamia, every handful of barley mattered. That was your wage, your currency, and your life insurance, all in one itchy sack. And if the numbers didn't line up, oh, you bet the beard would have words, possibly loud ones, and possibly in front of everyone. This man, your boss for the day, is not just any middle manager. His beard alone signals status. Long, plaited, and oiled, it practically has its own reputation. Historians agree that in Mesopotamian culture, the beard was a symbol of authority, wisdom, and masculinity. The longer and better groomed it was, the more clout a man had. And yours? His beard is a luxurious five-tiered cascade that probably has its own servant to comb it. So yes, he outranks you. It can. He leans in while you're counting. Don't let me catch you skimming, he growls, and walks off before you can even pretend to smile. That's fine. You didn't want to be friends anyway. But the warning hangs in the air, like the sharp scent of goat urine wafting from the street. You run the numbers again. A mainstream historical fact here. Cuneiform tablets weren't just for poetry and prayer. The vast majority of recovered tablets are boring. Ledgers, ration lists, loan agreements. Bureaucracy, not art, built these cities, and keeping accurate records was not a casual affair. Entire careers rose and fell on whether you wrote 62 shekels instead of 63. A mistake in grain calculations could mean someone somewhere got less food, and they'd know. They'd report it, and someone would trace that mistake back to the original scribe. Your stomach growls. You haven't eaten since a handful of dried dates last night, and your fingers are shaking slightly from both hunger and fear. You steal a glance at the big man again. He's berating someone else now, a boy who dropped a weight on the wrong scale. The boy bows so low his forehead grazes the dusty floor. You quickly look away. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian work culture was inherently brutal or just intensely organized. After all, in a place where floods could wipe out entire harvests, discipline might have been a survival strategy. That said, there are records of workers being whipped, dismissed, or returned to the fields, a polite euphemism for losing your job and being assigned to backbreaking agricultural labor. You imagine being handed a hoe and told to dig canals until your hands bled. Suddenly, the numbers on your tablet look more sacred than scribbles. But your job isn't just counting, it's also about politics. You have to know who to nod at, who to avoid, and who to impress. Gossip flows faster than the Euphrates during the rainy season. Someone claims the head scribe is taking bribes. Another swears the high priest's nephew got fired for misplacing a gold goblet. Or maybe he borrowed it for a party and forgot to return it. Hard to say. You're not immune to workplace drama either. A rival scribe, you call him the weasel, though not to his face, keeps smirking whenever you pass by. You're not sure why. Maybe he saw you misspell oxen last week. Or maybe he just knows you're replaceable. The clay is drying faster than you expected. That's bad. Once it sets, corrections are almost impossible. You curse under your breath and scribble a final line. Just as you place your stylus down, a goat barrels through the courtyard, chased by a red-faced child. The goat snags the corner of your bench and thunk, down goes the basket. Barley spills like golden confetti. You freeze. Everyone turns. The weasel chuckles. The beard boss is glaring, of course. You scramble to collect the kernels, scooping them back into the basket while trying to hide your sheer terror. Did you damage the seal? The boss barks. You hold up the clay tag. Miraculously, it's intact. He grunts and turns away. You've just barely avoided disaster. A quirky tidbit. It's believed some supervisors actually hired dream interpreters to advise them on firing decisions. One poor soul might have been dismissed, not because of any real error, but because the boss dreamed of black birds. Go figure. You finally finish the count, smoothing the wet clay of your tablet with the side of your hand. It's sloppy, but legible. You sign it. Your mark is a crude little fish. Then you place it in the stack of completed reports. Work today isn't over, of course. Now it's time to help unload new shipments. The sun is climbing higher, baking the city until it smells like old bread and sweat. You can't imagine doing this forever. But what else is there? It's not like you can just change careers in Mesopotamia. Freelancer isn't a word anyone uses, not unless they mean unemployed. As you move to the storage shed, you wonder how many other workers have stood here, wondering if today was the day they'd be cast out. How many had counted barley, written numbers, bowed to beards, and still been dismissed? Probably too many. Still, you've survived this morning, and around here, that's a kind of victory. The sun has climbed well above the rooftops now, painting the temple's mud brick walls a harsh, blinding gold. You wince as the glare bounces off polished stone courtyards, catching in your eyes like a needle. You're not alone. Dozens of workers squint and shuffle about, hauling goods, sweeping steps, and adjusting ropes tied to tethered animals, who look just as bored as you feel. But you don't have time to stare at oxen. Your next assignment takes you inside the temple itself, and that means double the pressure. You tread lightly, stepping past towering columns carved with protective spirits, each one staring down with bulging eyes and bird-like wings. You bow your head, not out of devotion exactly, but because you've heard what happens when someone disrespects temple space. Fired? Yes. Cursed? Possibly. Given latrine duty for a month? Definitely. In Mesopotamia, the temple wasn't just a place of worship. It was the economic engine of the city. Temples owned land, employed workers, and served as banks, bakeries, libraries, and tax collection centers. You were just one of many cogs in this divine bureaucracy. Today's job is simple. Assist the temple scribe in tallying offerings. Of course, simple here means do it flawlessly or risk humiliation in front of both gods and men. You kneel beside a low stone table where goods are piling up. Fish wrapped in reeds, baskets of onions, bronze trinkets, and two alarmingly angry-looking geese. The geese honk like they're unionizing. The temple scribe, an older man with a permanent frown, grunts a greeting. He smells of ink and dried leeks. Without looking at you, he mutters, "Count everything. Write clearly. Don't speak." You nod. This man probably hasn't smiled since the last lunar eclipse. You try to focus, stylus in hand, as you scratch symbols into a moist clay tablet. The offerings must be properly recorded. Too much fish? Suspicion of theft. Too little fish? Accusation of fraud. Miswrite fish instead of goose. May the gods help you. A mainstream historical fact. The temple staff were a major employer in cities like Ur, Nippur, and Lagash. They had layers of hierarchy, from the high priest or priestess at the top, down to cooks, sweepers, guards, and record keepers. Messing up as a temple worker was especially risky because you weren't just disappointing a human boss. You were failing the divine order, and Mesopotamians really hated that. While writing, you glance at a bronze amulet being dropped into a jar. You quickly scribble it down. 1 bronze crescent, approximate weight, it was 3 shekels. But the scribe catches your eye movement and tisks. You are not here to admire the treasures, he hisses. Do you want to be cast out to the fields? You don't, but now you're nervous again. Your handwriting wobbles. You correct it, leaving a smear, which you smooth over with your thumb, hoping it won't dry that way. Your clay tablets are your life, one bad one, and you might find yourself assigned to grain hauling duties under the scalding sun. A quirky temple fact. Some offerings were edible, and it was common for temple workers to nibble leftovers. But if you were caught taking a bite too early, or worse, pocketing sacred raisins, you could be dismissed or even flogged. There's a well-known tale of a temple assistant who ate a sacred fig and had to walk barefoot through thorn bushes as penance. Not a great career move. Nearby, a young acolyte drops a cup of sesame oil. The splash goes everywhere. The floor becomes a slippery mess. The high priest's sandals are now shiny in the worst way. You stare in horror as the boy whimpers and tries to mop it up with his sleeve. The scribe sighs. "That one won't last the month," he mutters. Historians still argue whether the temple workforce was fairly treated or held under strict ritual discipline. Some see temples as centers of opportunity, a place to rise if you were clever and devout. Others argue that temple laborers were bound by sacred oaths that often veiled exploitative conditions under the name of piety. Either way, the scribe's stone-cold expression suggests that mercy is in short supply. You finish your tablet and hand it to him. He sniffs, literally, then scans the marks with those hawk eyes. After a long pause, during which you mentally rehearse how to beg for a second chance, he grunts, "Acceptable." You breathe out. Then you're dismissed with a flick of the wrist, just as another junior scribe rushes in. His face is flushed. The grain tax records from the Northern Canal. He pants. They don't match. The scribe frowns. "Again?" The boy nods. 3 baskets short. It could be theft. You don't wait to hear more. You slip out, half walking, half fleeing, past the temple's inner sanctum. The perfume of burning incense wraps around you, dizzying and slightly overwhelming. Statues of gods rise behind veils of smoke, judging, unmoving, and terrifying. You suddenly feel very mortal, very fireable. Outside, the brightness is a slap. The courtyard is crowded again. More workers, more animals, more deliveries. You squint toward the storerooms. You're being reassigned for the afternoon, tallying temple employees' rations. It's not the worst job, but it means you'll be near the scribal apprentices again. And that means the weasel. He greets you with a slow, fake smile. "Still here, I see." He purrs. Amazing what passes for competent these days. You resist the urge to throw a date at his head. Instead, you smile sweetly. "It's true," you say. "Some of us just have staying power." A donkey brays loudly beside you. You both glance at it, then return to your respective tasks. The weasel mutters something about gravel-brained clerks and wanders off. As you sit down to check the worker ration logs, a task that will last till sunset, you reflect on the rules, the gods, and the endless math. Temple jobs weren't just jobs. They were performance art for the heavens. You had to be reverent, accurate, quick, and quiet. And still, one wrong number could be your last. And now you're responsible for making sure everyone gets exactly what they're due. Which, by the way, is a fantastic way to make enemies. If someone thinks you cheated them, they could complain to a superior. Or worse, start whispering that you're not up to the task. You sigh, press your stylus into the clay, and whisper under your breath, "Let this be the last barley tally I ever do." It won't be. As the sun dips lower, casting long, stretch your shadow beams across the courtyard. Your day is far from over. Your hands, sticky with the remnants of various temple offerings, are now gripping the rough scroll of employee records. This is one of the most boring jobs you've had all week. A ledger of workers' rations. The food is hardly the point here, though. What matters is who gets the food and who doesn't. And you, unfortunately, are in charge of deciding that today. The workers watch, as anxious as you feel. You glance at the list. Shepherds, priests, stonemasons, dancers. Everyone in this city seems to be on someone's payroll, except for you, apparently. You're a temporary hand, someone who will vanish the moment the barley is counted and the record signed. The most frustrating part? You're not even sure if your ration is fair. There's no real way to know, and no one is about to tell you. If you miscalculate or show too much mercy, you're fired. If you're too harsh, you're fired. There's no winning, not really. Everyone looks at you like you're the villain or the savior, depending on what your tally says. The process is methodical but tense. As you cross out names and adjust quantities, there's an unsettling sense of power. You decide whether someone's family gets a full meal tonight or whether they'll be left staring at their meager rations, hungry and defeated. You try to swallow that thought, because thinking like that doesn't help you focus. But every scratch of the stylus feels heavier than the last. Historians still debate whether workers in ancient Mesopotamia were treated as assets or commodities. Some argue that the complex network of goods and services, from grain for labor to the social safety net of the temple, reflected a care for the workforce. Others point out the brutal realities of the system, where one mistake could lead to a lifetime of hardship. A quirky tidbit: workers were often paid in kind, meaning you didn't just get barley for your time. In fact, there's evidence that some workers got beer as part of their salary. It's likely that the brew was fermented from barley itself. So, you could say your pay for the day might include a hearty swig of history. A loud shout interrupts your thoughts. You look up, startled. A middle-aged man, dirty from the day's labor, is standing at the gates of the temple, shouting toward the overseer. "The grain's been tampered with," he roars. "I demand justice. I demand proper compensation." His voice is filled with panic and anger. It's a good thing he's not pointing at you. Yet, you watch as the overseer, who's been napping in a corner, slowly rises. The man's outburst has caught the attention of a few nearby workers. There's a ripple through the crowd as whispers spread. If you were being honest with yourself, this feels like the beginning of something you'd rather not be a part of. That uneasy tension is already in the air. The overseer doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he motions for the man to come closer. "Show me your rations," he says, his voice sharp. The worker, clearly agitated, gestures toward the basket slung over his shoulder. "It's been light for weeks. You know it. The grain's been cut short." A mainstream historical fact. Accusations of theft were serious business in Mesopotamian society. A loss of grain or any goods could be grounds for severe punishment, including being branded as a thief, whipped, or even cast out from the community. The temple, as a major power, had both the responsibility and the authority to investigate these complaints, often relying on witnesses or the meticulous record-keeping of scribes like yourself. You stand there, watching as the overseer examines the grain basket. His hands move slowly, almost methodically, and you can't help but feel the anxiety of the crowd. If this man's complaint holds any weight, the overseer might have to review every worker's records, and you'll likely be caught up in the mess. You didn't ask for this, but you know what they say. You can't escape the eye of the gods or the scrutiny of your boss. Historians still debate whether these accusations were often truthful or just an easy way for workers to shift blame. While it's true that ancient records sometimes show discrepancies in tallying, it's also true that the elite, the temple administrators, and high priests were well known for exploiting the system. Your job as a scribe is to protect the integrity of the record. But how can you do that when so many eyes are on you? The overseer turns to you suddenly, his eyes piercing. "You've been counting rations today, yes?" His voice is low, almost threatening. "What does your record say about this man?" Your throat tightens. You hesitate before answering, knowing your next words could be the difference between keeping your job or losing it on the spot. You pull the scroll forward, scanning the worker's name against your list. "It seems there are discrepancies," you say slowly. "It looks like his last few rations have been short by a little over 2 shekels. The worker flinches. You see a flicker of disappointment cross his face. Maybe it's your imagination, but you swear he looks at you like you've just sentenced him to death. You try not to meet his gaze. The overseer grunts, nodding once. "Good work," he mutters, before turning to the disgruntled man. "You will be reassigned, and your complaint will be looked into." The worker stumbles away, defeated. He's going to be out of here soon. His accusations have been dismissed for now, but it's clear his standing has been tarnished. You feel a pang of guilt, but you quickly bury it. You're just a cog in the wheel, just following the orders. But it doesn't stop the thoughts from creeping in. You wonder how many others have been in this man's shoes, accused, judged, and cast out. The system feels like a maze, and you're trapped inside it. As the evening winds down and the sun begins its slow descent into the horizon, you finish the final entries on your ledger. Your fingers ache, but the task is done. You pack away your scroll, and for the first time today, take a deep breath. Another day survived. But this job, this life, it isn't easy. Not by any means. The overseer might be a little less gruff tomorrow, or he might not. The man's complaint may have been false, or it might have been the truth. But either way, there's one thing you know for certain. The weight of the clay tablet is nothing compared to the weight of the expectations placed on you. You stand and head for the gates, ready for the next task. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll get lucky and be sent home for the night. But in a city built on bureaucracy, don't count on it. By now, the sun has dipped completely behind the mud brick walls of Ur, casting long shadows that stretch across the dusty streets. The city's pace has slowed. The sounds of chattering workers and clattering carts replaced by the soft murmur of tired voices and the distant bleating of goats. You, however, are still wide awake, your mind swirling with what you've seen today. The workers and their whispered grievances, the accusations of stolen grain, the suspicion that lurks behind every transaction. You wonder just how deep the problems go. The final task of the day awaits you, though, and it's not something you're thrilled about. A small group of temple workers has been assigned to prepare the evening meal, a humble dish of barley soup and dried fish, for the scribe guild, and you're being asked to oversee the process, which, in this case, means making sure the soup isn't too salty, the fish is appropriately dried, and everything goes according to the temple's strict standards. A misplaced grain of barley could bring a priest down on you like a hammer on a nail. As you walk toward the kitchen area, which smells faintly of garlic and the remnants of boiled vegetables, you realize that, once again, you are faced with a job that is far from glamorous. The high priests don't care about the scent of your clothes, your calluses, or the ache in your back. All they care about is that the sacred meal is prepared on time, to perfection, without a hint of error. Mistakes in the kitchen can result in much more than a scolding. In fact, it's widely believed that certain temple workers were sent off to the fields when they failed to meet expectations, which, as you've learned, could mean anything from working with sick animals to dragging water from the river during a drought. You enter the small kitchen and are immediately met with the sound of chopping knives, the hum of murmured prayers, and the soft hiss of boiling pots. The workers here are focused, but there's a palpable unease in the air. They know what happens when a meal goes wrong. how one minor mistake could result in public humiliation, or worse, a loss of standing among the priests. The chef, an older woman with a streak of gray in her hair and a surprisingly calm demeanor, looks up as you approach. "You're here to check on the fish, yes?" she asks without missing a beat. Her hands never stop moving, even as she speaks. You nod, suddenly aware of how much you've come to rely on your own daily survival instincts. Yes, the priests want it to be perfect. You glance nervously at the basket of dried fish. It looks fine to you, but you're no expert. The woman gives you an appraising look. Perfect? There's no such thing. But we can aim for edible. She adds a pinch of salt to a boiling pot, then tilts her head. Take a seat. Watch how it's done. And don't worry about the priests. They'll eat whatever we give them. After all, they're only here for the offerings, not the flavor. A quirky tidbit. Some believe that the priests did get special treatment when it came to their meals. In fact, there are records that show some priests were offered meat with their barley soup, while the rest of the temple staff, including laborers like you, had to make do with fish and barley. Still, it seems that this was less about flavor and more about offering the gods the finest meal and then eating the leftovers. You sit down on a nearby stool and begin to watch the woman work. Her hands are deft, moving with the precision of someone who has done this for years, and you can't help but be impressed. She chops the fish, arranges the barley, and stirs the broth, all while maintaining an eerie calm. You wonder if she's ever feared the wrath of the priests, or if she's simply grown accustomed to their demands. Historians still argue whether temple workers had any say in how they prepared food. Was there any creativity in the kitchen, or was it purely formulaic? You suspect it was a mix of both, but for you, that's hardly the point. The question of whether you've done a good job is secondary to who is looking over your shoulder. A perfect dish doesn't matter unless it's in front of the right person at the right time. The night drags on, and you find yourself staring at the glowing embers in the kitchen hearth. The smell of cooking food is thick, almost intoxicating, but it doesn't soothe you. You've been in this kitchen for hours now, making sure everything is just right, trying to ignore the little voice in the back of your mind, telling you that it might still go wrong. And it does. One of the workers, a nervous young man, suddenly panics. He's dropped a bowl of salt into the pot. His hands are trembling as he tries to salvage it, but the damage is already done. You feel your stomach tighten. You know what this means. You've seen it happen before. The woman next to you sighs. "It's done. Throw it out. No one can eat it now." She turns, calling for the overseer. You see him coming, his gait slow and deliberate, but his eyes are already flashing with a mixture of frustration and anger. He doesn't speak as he enters the kitchen, just surveys the situation. Then, without a word, he motions for the young man to leave. The poor worker doesn't even get a chance to defend himself before he's escorted out. You know what's coming. You hear whispers that the young man will be sent to the fields for the rest of the season, a punishment meant to teach him the consequences of his mistake. No mercy, just labor under the sun. The meal is eventually salvaged, but the mood has shifted. The priests will eat tonight, but the lesson has been taught, and not just to the young man. You, too, have learned that your job is precarious. The path from worker to exile is shorter than you imagined. A quirky fact: some workers were known to stage their own small mistakes to avoid harsher punishments. In fact, some tales suggest that workers would purposely ruin minor dishes in hopes of getting sent home early or to avoid more tedious assignments. There's even a report of a cook who intentionally set his bread on fire, only to be reassigned to easy work in the temple archives for the rest of the season. As you leave the kitchen, your heart is heavy. The city, once full of possibility, feels more like a trap. You can't help but think that maybe, just maybe, you could have done something different, something that wouldn't have led to this young man's fate. But you know you're still here, and tomorrow will be another day of counting, tallying, preparing, and most of all, surviving. And at the end of it all, the gods will be watching. The following morning dawns brighter than it should. The last lingering traces of yesterday's hot sun still seem to scorch the earth, even though it's early. You drag yourself from your bed, feeling the ache in your muscles from a long day of toiling, watching others toil, and keeping your head low to avoid getting swept up in the inevitable missteps of the day. The temple food disaster lingers in your mind, gnawing at your confidence. You can't shake the image of the young man, eyes downcast, as he's escorted from the temple kitchen. How easily he became expendable. You pull your tunic over your head, barely noticing the worn patches where the fabric is threadbare. It's nothing special, but you know that nothing you wear will stop the inevitable. That is, your need to keep working. No choices, no breaks. A life dictated by schedules, by grain counts, by the whims of priests and overseers. You wonder if anyone here ever truly rests, or if they all just exist in a constant state of survival. You push the thought away. There's no time for philosophy when your next task awaits. You head toward the temple again, following the same worn path between the dried mud bricks of homes and workshops. The morning is sticky with the smell of fresh bread, cooking meats, and the dampness that always lingers in the shadows of the marketplace. You can hear the clatter of metal against stone and the faint calls of merchants trying to drum up business for their wares. the air taste of salt, as if even the atmosphere around you is trying to remind you of the sea, a reminder that your life is as fragile and unpredictable as the tides. Today, your task is simple enough. Deliver a fresh batch of clay tablets to the high priest's inner sanctum. It sounds easy, but you've been warned repeatedly that any mishandling, any improper presentation will result in more than just a verbal reprimand. It'll be your reputation, your job, your future, all in the balance. As you make your way through the temple gates, you feel a strange sense of tension that you can't explain. It's something about the priests this morning. They seem especially quiet, murmuring among themselves as they pass by, glancing over their shoulders at you with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. You wonder whether it's just paranoia, or if something is brewing, something bigger than you can grasp. The high priest's inner sanctum is a grand space, the walls lined with intricate carvings depicting the gods in battle and the heroes of ancient tales. You step cautiously over the threshold, careful not to disturb the sacred space, even though it's empty of worshippers at this hour. The high priest himself is nowhere to be seen, just his assistants, scribes like you, preparing scrolls and tablets, bustling about as though the weight of the world rests on their shoulders. One of them, an older scribe with a stern face, catches sight of you and gestures for you to come closer. He's holding a tablet in his hand, already inscribed with the names of donors who've contributed to the temple in the past week. You give him the stack of fresh tablets, careful to arrange them in order, and hand them over with a bow. "Ah, yes," the scribe mutters, examining the new batch. "We'll need these prepared for the next offering. The gods don't appreciate haste, and neither do we. A slip of the stylus, and your name could be written off, both in the records and in the minds of the priests. Be careful, boy." His words hit you like a slap. You've heard them before, but they feel heavier today, as though they're more than just casual warnings. There's something in his tone that suggests it's not just your position that's on the line, but your very survival in this place. A quirky tidbit. It said that scribes, especially the younger ones, often had to memorize a kind of word-for-word guide to avoid punishment. Messing up an entry wasn't just a mistake, it was an offense. Some scribes were known to use cheat sheets hidden in the folds of their tunics, scribbling down critical words or phrases to remember during long hours of record keeping. One scribe even used his sandals as his secret library, inscribing crucial phrases on the inside soles. No one noticed until he was caught walking through the temple with ink-stained feet. As you stand there, trying to keep your hands steady and your heart from racing, you can't help but wonder about the ancient scribes who worked here before you. Were they any more successful than you at staying on top of it all? Or did they too find themselves caught in the web of temple bureaucracy, just as you are now. Historians still argue whether ancient scribes truly had autonomy, or if they were simply tools for the priests and administrators who held the real power. Were they revered for their skill, or were they seen as nothing more than human record keepers? You've come to realize that the answer is murky. They were part of a system that functioned because of them, but only as long as they were useful. If you ever failed in your duty, your importance could vanish in the blink of an eye. You quickly move through the temple halls, trying to ignore the eyes that follow you. You try to focus on the task at hand, making sure the scrolls are neatly organized, each inscription legible and accurate. But with every stroke of your stylus, you feel the weight of the task and the knowledge that your mistakes are not just mistakes. They are your undoing. It's then that a voice cuts through your thoughts. A priest, tall and wrapped in flowing linen, stops in front of you. He looks down at the tablets you've just handed over, and for a moment his gaze softens, almost approving. "You've done well," he says, his voice surprisingly kind. "The gods smile upon your work." The words are warm, almost comforting, and yet they send a chill down your spine. How easily a smile could turn into a frown. How easily you could be replaced. But for now, you can breathe. You step back from the inner sanctum, feeling the weight lift just a little. You've survived another task, another day, and tomorrow you'll do it all again. As you leave the temple, the early evening air cools your skin, and the faint murmur of the city grows louder. The streets are a little less crowded now, the hustle of the day fading into a more peaceful rhythm. But the tension from the past few hours lingers, thick and unshakable. You wonder if tomorrow will be another chance to prove yourself, or if this small victory will be enough to carry you through another round of temple politics. You're not sure, but you do know one thing for certain. In Mesopotamia, the game of survival is played one task at a time, and you'll be back tomorrow, ready or not. The next day rolls in with a heavy, humid fog, hanging over the city like a thick, suffocating blanket. The sun fights to break through, casting weak light through the mist, but the air remains thick with moisture. You shuffle to the temple gates once again, your sandals squelching against the damp ground, the morning feeling like the beginning of another battle, one you're not sure you're ready for. Today, your task is different. The temple has called for a new set of records to be drafted, the monthly tribute collection from neighboring cities, their taxes, their offerings, their debts. You know that this is no small feat. The temple doesn't just collect grain and silver from the workers. It extends its grasp over whole regions, extracting tributes that form the backbone of the city's wealth. The pressure to get these figures right is immense. After all, One missing digit could mean a very real loss of favor from the gods, and that would result in the collapse of your already precarious position. The journey to the temple's record halls is familiar, the streets now slightly quieter as the workday drags on. Your mind is preoccupied with yesterday's tasks, the scribe's disapproving glance, the weight of those sacred tablets. You know that if you make any mistake today, it won't just be your livelihood on the line. The reputation of the temple itself could be at risk. The gods demand precision. They are watching, as always. You arrive, greeted by the usual stale smell of dried ink and the faint metallic scent of bronze. The scribes, all bent over their tablets, seem to be in a deep state of concentration. You, too, settle into your seat, but there's a nagging feeling at the back of your mind. It's as though the very air in this room is watching you, waiting for you to slip up. It doesn't help that one of the more senior scribes, a tall man with sharp features and even sharper eyes, is lingering nearby, as though making sure you're following the exact standards expected of you. His presence sends a chill through you. He doesn't speak, but he watches every move you make. You can feel the weight of his gaze on your shoulder as you begin your work. With each line you inscribe into the clay tablet, you wonder, if I make one mistake, will I end up in the fields like that young man from yesterday? A mainstream historical fact. In ancient Mesopotamian society, those who worked for the temple, especially scribes, were often seen as both powerful and vulnerable. They had knowledge that others didn't, and they could influence decisions that affected the entire city. However, their position was precarious. A single error, particularly in the records of the temple's wealth, could result in severe punishment, including being cast out, losing one's rank, or, in extreme cases, being sent to work as a laborer under the hot sun, a punishment feared by all. A quirky tidbit. Some scribes were known to fudge numbers slightly, especially when it came to taxes and offerings, to ensure that certain individuals or families were spared from paying more than they could afford. It wasn't out of kindness, but rather out of political savvy. A well-placed error in the records could secure a favor or a quiet gift from those who had the power to change a scribe's fate. It's said that some scribes even kept private, off-the-books records hidden away in secret compartments, just in case they ever needed a bargaining chip. As you continue your work, a feeling of unease settles over you. The sharp-eyed scribe is still hovering nearby, watching. His silence is worse than any critique he could give. You try to focus on your writing, but your hand trembles slightly. You glance at the work of the other scribes, each absorbed in their own calculations. How do they do it? How do they maintain such precision day after day? Historians still argue whether scribes had a true sense of purpose, or whether they were just trapped in the machine of bureaucracy. Were they revered as keepers of knowledge, or were they simply cogs in a system designed to maintain control over every aspect of life? Some say that a good scribe could rise in status, potentially even becoming a trusted advisor to the temple's higher ups. Others argue that no matter how skilled you were always just one mistake away from being discarded. The tension in the room thickens as the hours pass. You push through your calculations, fighting to keep your mind sharp. The number of offerings, the weight of the grain, the quantity of silver, everything must be recorded with absolute accuracy. You feel the sweat trickling down your back as the work becomes more taxing. And then it happens. Your stylus slips. Just a tiny scratch, a stray mark that mars the surface of your tablet. It's nothing major, but it's enough to make your heart lurch. The line is now uneven, the figures slightly off. You try to smooth the clay with your thumb, but the damage is done. The scribe in the corner, sharp-eyed as always, immediately notices. He strides over, a frown creasing his brow. "What is this?" he demands, pointing to the mistake. Your breath catches in your throat. Do you have any idea how important this work is? This is the temple's tribute list, not some child scribbling. His voice rises, and you feel your face flush with heat. You open your mouth to apologize, but he cuts you off. "You will fix this, and you will fix it now," he orders, his tone cold and final. You nod quickly, your hands trembling as you try to correct the mistake, to erase the error before it can be seen. The pressure is overwhelming. This is it, the moment that could determine whether you stay in this room or are cast out to the streets. The minutes stretch on, each one heavier than the last. You look down at the tablet, praying that the gods are merciful today. A quirky piece of temple lore suggests that scribes often prayed to a god called Nabu, the patron of wisdom and writing. In fact, it's believed that scribes would recite prayers for divine guidance before embarking on a new set of records. It's said that the most superstitious scribes would even anoint their fingers with sacred oil before touching the clay tablet, hoping to avoid errors that could cost them dearly. You finish the corrections just in time. The sharp-eyed scribe doesn't say anything more, but you can feel his gaze lingering on you for a moment longer than usual. You take a slow, steadying breath. It's not a victory, but it's enough for today. You're still here, still alive in this game of bureaucracy and power. You wonder how much longer you can keep playing. The next few days pass in a blur. The weight of your tasks and the oppressive heat of the city blending into one indistinct, stifling reality. There's no time to reflect, no time to breathe, just the endless march of clay tablets, numbers, and orders. The city pulses around you, a living entity of dust, sweat, and the constant churn of commerce. Every morning you wake to the same routine. Don't mess up, don't make any waves, and above all, don't stand out in a way that will draw the wrong kind of attention. Standing out here in the wrong way can be a death sentence for your career. You've learned to avoid the overseer's eyes, to steer clear of the sharp glares of higher scribes, to keep your voice down when speaking, and to make sure every number aligns perfectly with the last. There's an odd comfort in the monotony, a strange kind of rhythm that settles in your bones after enough days of hard labor. You find yourself beginning to lose track of the passage of time, of the seasons, of any external measure of the world. The temple and its demands are your universe now. But today is different. Today, as you enter the temple gates, you can feel it. The air has shifted, charged with something that unsettles you. You can't put your finger on it, but something feels off. You notice it in the way the workers move, hurried, but not quite focused, in the way the priests glance around nervously, exchanging whispers you can't hear. Even the scribes seem to be on edge, their usual quiet hum replaced by an anxious murmur. You try to shake it all off, but the feeling persists, like an itch you can't scratch. And when you enter the record hall, you see the source of it. The high priest, the one with the flowing robes and the stern expression, is standing in the middle of the hall, flanked by several guards. The usual calm of the room is gone, replaced by a sense of dread that hangs like smoke in the air. You wonder briefly if this is some kind of ritual, perhaps a new offering, a special ceremony. But the tense silence that fills the room tells you this is no ceremony. This is something far more serious. The high priest steps forward, and his voice booms across the room, silencing the whispers. "We have a matter of utmost importance to address," he announces. His eyes sweep across the scribes, then linger on you. You straighten, your heart racing in your chest. You have no idea what this is about, but your gut tells you it won't be good. "There has been a discrepancy," the high priest continues, his voice echoing off the walls. "A theft, a betrayal." Your stomach drops. A theft, betrayal. The words seem so out of place here in the sacred halls of the temple. You glance around the room, trying to catch the eye of a fellow scribe, but no one meets your gaze. They all look down, avoiding the priest's stare. He steps forward again, his eyes narrowing. "It has come to our attention that the grain tribute from the northern provinces was tampered with. Some of the records are missing. Others have been altered." His gaze lingers on a few scribes in particular, including you. Your throat tightens. Could it be? Could someone have doctored the records? It wouldn't be the first time someone has tried to manipulate the tribute amounts. But who would do such a thing now, when the stakes are so high? The high priest's next words make your blood run cold. Someone in this room has been altering records, he declares, and unless the guilty party steps forward immediately, there will be consequences. Your heart skips a beat. The weight of the accusation is so heavy, you feel like it's pushing you into the floor. You want to shout that it wasn't you, that you've been meticulous in every task, in every line of writing. But you know better than to speak out of turn. The high priest doesn't want an explanation. He wants someone to blame. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient Mesopotamia's priesthood had incredible power, especially over the temple's wealth and the city's resources. The temples were not just places of worship. They were the economic heart of the city, and the priests were the economic authorities. They controlled everything from trade and taxes to land ownership and loans. A single accusation of theft or fraud could ruin a person's career or their life. A quirky tidbit: some temples were so powerful that they were considered autonomous. This meant that, in some cases, the priest could even declare a state of emergency or lockdown and dictate who could leave or enter the temple at any time. In a society where the temple was a law unto itself, a scribe who committed a crime under its watch had nowhere to run. You glance around again. No one is stepping forward. You know that the guilty party is likely in this room. But who? Could it be one of the senior scribes? Could it be someone else in the temple hierarchy who's been altering the records for their own gain? You can't say. You just know that this is your worst nightmare, being swept up in a scandal that isn't even yours. The high priest looks around the room again, his gaze sharp as a knife. We will find the guilty party, and when we do, there will be no mercy. His voice hardens, sending a shiver down your spine. He looks directly at you for the briefest moment. Your breath catches, but then, with a single sharp nod, he turns and motions for the guards to leave. They move quickly, ushering everyone out of the room with an efficiency that makes your head spin. The entire temple has just been put on alert, and you, somehow, are caught right in the middle of it. You stand frozen for a moment, your hands clammy against your tablet, unsure of what to do next. The room feels smaller, the walls closing in on you. Your work, which just yesterday seemed so mundane, suddenly feels like a tightrope walk. One wrong step, and you could fall. As the last of the scribes file out, you feel the weight of the high priest's words pressing down on you. The feeling of dread hangs over you like a storm cloud. You wonder, fleetingly, if the gods are watching you today, or if they've turned their gaze elsewhere. Either way, the day has only just begun, and you know that no matter what happens, it's not going to end well. You leave the record hall with your mind racing, wondering who could be behind this scandal, and, more importantly, if it could be you. The silence that follows you out of the record hall is deafening. The temple grounds are still, as if holding its breath, waiting for something. Your mind races as you move through the narrow corridors, the weight of the high priest's accusation heavy on your shoulders. You didn't alter the records. You didn't tamper with the grain. You've worked tirelessly to make sure everything was correct. So, why is your heart pounding in your chest like you're the one on trial? The guards who stand watch at the temple gates seem to glance at you more than usual, their eyes calculating. You avoid their gaze, moving quickly through the crowds that are now strangely sparse, as though everyone is avoiding the main square today. There's a palpable unease in the air, as if the city itself knows something's wrong, something's changed. You walk aimlessly for a while, the streets around you growing quieter the farther you go. The morning fog is starting to lift, but the chill remains in the air, matching the tension in your gut. You try to tell yourself that the accusation wasn't aimed at you. It can't be. You've been nothing but diligent, but that doesn't stop the gnawing feeling in the back of your mind. What if someone's already noticed your small mistake last week? What if your name was already whispered in the corners of the temple, connected to this scandal? You shake the thought away and keep walking, trying to breathe, trying to think clearly. The next move is uncertain. You could stay out here, hiding, but that would only delay the inevitable. You could go back to the temple and face the consequences, but what if they've already decided to cast you aside, as easily as a broken clay tablet? A mainstream historical fact. While some scribes could find their way into powerful positions, the vast majority lived with the constant fear that their job could be taken from them at any time. The priesthood wielded incredible power, and as temple employees, scribes were not immune to their whims. An accusation, regardless of guilt or innocence, could ruin a career, and the further one climbed within the hierarchy, the higher the stakes became. A quirky tidbit. In the most extreme cases, scribes who were accused of theft or dishonesty would be forced to undergo a trial by ordeal. One common test involved being thrown into the river with a weight tied to their ankles. If they survived, they were presumed innocent. If they drowned, well, it was seen as divine judgment. You stop walking as the thought of the river trial flashes across your mind. The idea of being thrown into the water with nothing but your life on the line seems almost too much to bear. But then you realize something. This is it. If the priests are going to accuse you, they're going to do it now. There's no hiding. If there's any chance of clearing your name, you'll have to confront them. You can't run. You can't fade into the shadows like you've wanted to. Taking a deep breath, you turn around and head back toward the temple. You have no idea what the future holds, But you do know one thing. You can't let this go without a fight. You're not going to let some whisper or some shadowed accusation define your fate. As you approach the temple gates, you're met with the eyes of the guards again, but this time they step aside without a word. The silence between you is thick, as though everyone is waiting for the storm to break. The high priest's words echo in your mind, but now they sound less like a threat and more like a challenge. You step inside and make your way toward the inner sanctum, the very place where the accusations began. Your heart is racing, your palms sweating, but you push through it. When you reach the large hall, the high priest is standing there, flanked by his guards. The room feels colder now, darker somehow. You can see the scribes waiting, some nervously shifting their weight from foot to foot, others standing completely still. Everyone is waiting for someone to speak. The high priest looks up as you enter, his eyes locking onto yours. His expression is unreadable, a mask of authority, but there's something almost pleased about his gaze. He waves you forward, and for a moment, your feet feel like they're made of stone. Ah, the diligent scribe returns, the high priest says, his voice low but not unkind. You are determined to stay here, despite what's happening in this city, aren't you? You nod, swallowing hard. I've done my work as best I can, you say, your voice steady but strained. I have nothing to hide. The high priest gives you a long, measuring look, as if weighing your every word. The room is still, the air thick with anticipation. Then, slowly, he steps aside, revealing a small stack of clay tablets on a nearby table. They're marked with the same symbols you've seen in the temple's official records. These, the high priest begins, are the tablets that we've been reviewing. They are the same as the ones from your previous records, and yet something doesn't add up, a discrepancy. Your heart drops again, your stomach twisting into a knot. He's talking about the missing grain, the tampered records, and all the mistakes you've worked so hard to avoid. But, he continues, we've discovered something interesting. The discrepancies in these records, they don't stem from you. In fact, they stem from someone else. A shock runs through you. What? There's been a change in the grain tribute, the high priest continues, his eyes narrowing. Someone tried to cover it up. Someone who thought their position would protect them. He lets that hang in the air for a moment. But it's not you. The relief that floods through you is almost overwhelming. But it's also tainted with confusion. Who would have done this? And why? You can feel the tension still hanging in the air, but the high priest's gaze softens just a fraction. We'll be investigating this further, he adds, but for now, you're clear. You stand frozen, the words slowly sinking in. You're safe for now, but the storm isn't over. You wonder who's next, and what other secrets the temple might be hiding. The high priest's revelation leaves you standing there, your mind swirling with 1,000 questions. You've been cleared. You've been exonerated. For now. But a strange coldness lingers in the pit of your stomach. There's a sense of both relief and unease. The worst kind of combination. The weight of the situation hasn't fully lifted. Someone else is guilty, but they're still out there, hidden in the shadows, and the high priest hasn't said what will happen to them yet. Your heart is still pounding in your chest as you take a step back, the room feeling far too small for the number of thoughts racing through your head. The high priest motions toward you, signaling that you should leave. His eyes are no longer focused on you with suspicion, but the tension is still palpable. As you begin to turn away, you hear him speak once more. "You are free to go, scribe," he says, his voice carrying a weight you don't quite understand. "But remember, there is no place for failure here. Should anything else go wrong, we will not hesitate to act." His words linger in the air like a warning, but the underlying promise of protection, for now, echoes in your mind. You nod, stiffly, then turn to exit the hall. As you walk through the temple corridors, the weight in your chest starts to lessen, though you know it's only temporary. There's still too much left unanswered, too much hidden, too many games being played beneath the surface of this ancient bureaucracy. You step into the courtyard, where the morning sun is now fully shining, casting long shadows across the stone floor. The workers and scribes are going about their duties, moving with a mixture of efficiency and caution. But it seems the atmosphere has changed. It's not just the temple that's tense. The entire city feels it too. You breathe in deeply, trying to shake the feeling that the storm isn't over. You may have been cleared, but something tells you that in a place like this, it's only a matter of time before the next accusation, the next betrayal, the next scandal unfolds. The game of survival in ancient Mesopotamia is never ending, with its rules constantly shifting beneath your feet. As you make your way through the bustling courtyard, you catch sight of the young man from the kitchen, the one who had been sent to the fields after his mistake with the meal. He's standing off to the side, looking out of place in the crowd of scribes and workers. His clothes are worn, his face tired, but there's something in his expression that tells you he's seen the darker side of this city. You hesitate for a moment, wondering if you should approach him. After all, he's one of the few who truly understands what it's like to be cast aside, to become expendable. But just as quickly, you dismiss the thought. You've been part of the temple's machinery for long enough to know that getting too close to anyone can be dangerous. Relationships here are built on power, not friendship. A quirky tidbit. Despite the temple's strict hierarchical structure, some scribes manage to form surprisingly tight-knit networks within their own ranks. These networks were often built on mutual protection, sharing information, keeping quiet about one another's small mistakes, and, in some cases, even covering for each other. Some even believe that these networks helped protect scribes from the higher-ups' scrutiny, giving them an unspoken safety net in case something went wrong. You pass by the young man, offering him a quick glance, but saying nothing. The brief connection feels hollow, but it's enough. He knows, as you do, that the city is a place of power games, and you're both just trying to survive. As you continue your walk through the temple complex, your thoughts shift back to the high priest's words. You were cleared, but who is behind this? Who would have risked everything to alter the records, to tamper with the grain tribute? You wonder if the culprit is still among the scribes, still among the workers. The danger of being caught in the middle of this mess isn't over. You know that now. The road ahead is still uncertain. The high priest's vague promises of protection offer little comfort. You know that in a place like this, one mistake can undo everything. The question is, what will your next mistake be? You pause at the entrance of the temple, staring out at the city. The noise of the marketplace reaches your ears. The chatter of merchants, the clinking of coin, the rhythm of daily life. It feels far removed from the cold politics of the temple, but in reality, it's all the same power dynamics, the same struggle for control. Here, you're just another cog in the machine, your life dictated by the whims of the gods, the priests, and the ever-present bureaucracy. A quirky fact: even though life in Mesopotamia was harsh, and the risks of being caught in the temple's web were high, some scribes actually embraced the system. They knew that their job gave them a form of power, the power to record, to remember, to control the city's history. And in a world built on myth and legend, that kind of power was not something to be taken lightly. The sky begins to darken, the heat of the day giving way to the coolness of the evening. The streets grow quieter, the marketplace winding down for the night. You take a deep breath, letting the moment pass. Tomorrow will be another day, another chance to survive. You head back toward your small quarters, ready to rest, but also ready for what the next day might bring. One thing is clear: the game is far from over, and as long as you're here, in this city of clay and cuneiform, you'll keep playing, and maybe, just maybe, you'll make it through unscathed. For now, though, you're alive, and that's all you can hope for.